Hi, and welcome to The Seamless Blend, digital textile dialogues with Gabby and Jørgen. Our primary purpose is to educate and initiate discussions. The opinions expressed are solely our own and do not constitute professional advice or services. We invite contributions from our audience and maintain an open community on Discord.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Welcome to this final episode of 2024. And since this is, just before the holidays are kicking in and we've had a very exciting year behind us, we thought it would be appropriate to have this final episode just reviewing and talking a little bit more about what some of the highlights were, what has happened in our lives around DPC, digital fabrics, and 3D, and these things that we've talked about. So that's what we're going to be doing today, and diving into that. I guess kicking off with a little bit of the usual. I am Jørgen Seville. I've been working with textiles manufacturing for about 10 years in Hong Kong and China. And I've transitioned from there to move into more 3D and digital fabrics. And that's what I'm currently working on right now. And together I have with me here, Gabby.
Hello, I am Gabby Hill, and I'm a textile designer originally. I'm also co-founder of Bureau 555. We're a digital materials service provider, and I'm also an educator and a researcher. So yeah, excited as always to be here.
Yeah.
So we've I'm going to crack on. So basically, we've had a new format in season 2 where we've gone short and sweet. And we've been thinking about what season 3 might be for us next year. The good news is we're thinking of carrying on, but we're not sure in exactly what format and what capacity. So there could be something in person. So the interesting thing is that we've never actually met in person. We've never been in the same room. We could be the same person for all I know. We could be entirely AI generated. I could be talking to a bot at this point. Essentially, we're trying to think what could be really exciting for 2025 for us, for this podcast and what we've been doing. So that's, we will reveal that in January once we've had a few weeks to sort of percolate on that. And then, this episode, we're going to think about year in review, focuses and highlights. Personally, with our businesses, what have been some highlights, what we've seen happening in the industry, and also sort of like some of the wider context of things that have affected our industry as well. So we were going to kick off with January and not actually go through every single month, but I've kind of got that monthly review in my head. But the big thing for me within digital materials and 3D was when January kicked off 24, I was invited to speak on the Eco Design for Sustainable Products and Regulation talk, which is all around the DPP, the EU digital product passports. And that sort of kickstarted the public conversation in my mind around connecting digital materials to digital product passports, because actually they had been really... They exist in parallel, and digitization was happening on one track with industries, and then digital product passports was happening on another track with the supply chain. And logically for myself, and I think also for you, Jørgen, it just makes sense for if you're data collecting about materials from the very beginning around how they look in 3D and how they perform in 3D, if we collect the really important information around the impact of those materials, we can make this really robust digital material, which will then deliver the information we need for the digital product passport. So for me, January 2024, that was kind of like the first change actually moving on year. I don't know if you felt that as well.
Yeah, no, I think also thinking a little bit back to the beginning of the year, it feels like almost like a very different time, as I think it does for most. But I think for me, the highlight of the beginning of the year was very much that I was spending quite a lot of time in Latin America and Mexico, and got very involved in what was happening in the textiles industry there. And we kind of realized, I think this is changing quite significantly now. I think also with more and more Latin American companies picking up on digital technologies, but it was quite of a new thing, which was like, it was quite interesting because you have in various geographic locations around the world, you have kind of different maturity and adoption rate of technologies. And it seemed like, especially like as I was in Mexico in particular, there wasn't really that much focus on digitization and 3D, and companies were quite new to like even working with Clo or Browseware or doing any kind of like 3D. And I think that was it was a nice, almost like a bit of a reminder where it had been a very hot topic in the year before, and then coming and seeing that also like there are still a lot of places and a lot of companies that are not really, you know, working with these kind of technologies at all. And that's changed quite a lot in this, I feel.
Well, I was going to say it's geographically, it was a hot topic because actually, if you're sat listening to this and you're sat in a European brand or a British brand, or you're sat within a retailer a garment manufacturer or mill in India or Bangladesh or China, that's through our networks. Those are the people we know. Those are the supply chains we understand. That's the push and the pull and the economies we understand. I did work in America for 4 years, and in America it goes from down to up. So you're looking at Mexico, you're looking at denim coming up to North America, and obviously a huge market of South America, Brazil having a massive textile market, obviously. So, but you're quite often sat in Europe, you don't understand that huge market and the volumes that are happening there. It's just not part of your remit because you're never buying from there, because logistically it makes no logical sense.
Exactly. No, and I think this is what's going to be quite interesting to see in the next year. Not saying that we know anything about what's going to happen, but I think also now already seeing early conversations around, with the US political situation and tariffs and like all these discussions that's happening, how that will then, like, there's a lot happening related to the US market, and that has to do with Central and South America and kind of Latin America in general. And I think we might see some shift in business, and I think also that like a lot of the companies in Latin America are getting a little bit more kind of hungry for these solutions. They can be quite quick to adopt. But that was like for me at least, that marked quite the beginning of the year for me.
Yeah. Well, then I think my side, it then became an educational focus because I ran the digital fashion course at the V&A, the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. I ran that in February and March with a public showcase in April. And that's always kind of like a deep dive back into redefining the curriculum. We use Clo as a piece of software, and we also use Lens Studio, which is what we make the filters for Snapchat with. So, and we use a bit of Blender as well. So every year we kind of reconsider what skills we are aligning for the students. Can we bring in avatar creation without it being this really big like meta-human issue, which is then you're suddenly asking people to learn an entirely different skill on top of their fashion design knowledge, for example. We always look at representation in the digital space, which we should always be looking at. But particularly when we're teaching on this course, we're always pushing the boundaries of representation within the digital space, the scope of models we can use, what those models look like, and what power the students have to change those models or to reflect themselves or their community. So that becomes a really big time for me, and that's happening again in 25. The call out has happened and it closes on January the 5th. So if anyone's listening, feel free to apply if you're between the ages of 18 to 26. If you go to my LinkedIn, you can find the application form. It's a free course, just to mention. So fully funded. So that's always a real like deep dive. And then in 2025, our focus is going to be around theatre and performance, and we have some really interesting performative ideas around the course. So that's going to be very, very exciting. So education was a big thing for me. Feb, March and April. Definitely.
You mentioned, I wanted to almost like ask about that part about, I remember meta-humans was a very big thing, like almost like avatars, and it still is, like we both, I think, fundamentally understand, how they work and where they fit into these things, but they seem to have died out a little bit, or like it's lost quite a lot of that focus, where a number of companies were, all about Unreal Engine and lots of other companies were pursuing meta-humans. But what do you feel almost like, how has that evolved over the year as you see it, as you were also a little bit more involved with this at the beginning of the year?
I mean, what I've really seen is actually that people are still using human-like avatars, but they have just completely sort of just jump-started the realness of them because of the use of AI within that space. So actually, the argument that we have within where we're working in education is weighing up the amount of time it takes to teach compared with the skills you really need, because actually it becomes model casting because the models exist as meta-humans. So actually, do you need to learn how to do that is the question. I think it just needs to be about representation and ethics around use of like human forms and human likenesses. So on my side, we've not been able to embed that in the education spaces that we're working in, but we've also questioned whether it's needed at this point as well.
No, it took up quite a lot of focus at some point, and then we kind of like moved on the conversation to something else. So it's an interesting kind of little point to remark. But then you also went to Milan for the PI Apparel show.
PI, so we both went to PI Apparel, right? I went to Milan in March. Yes, so I went with DMIX, and it was the first time I visited, and as well as swimming in the lake and running around the hills with other conference attendees. I found it really interesting. I listened to all the big companies talking about how they were pushing forward with digital product creation. And of course, the main topic was AI and how AI was going to support all of these different processes that we have to do that are time consuming and challenging within creating digital materials and creating digital garment collections. And the AI was going to, save our workflows in that sense. I saw some really interesting, Atomic 6 was the company I was really interested in, or 6 Atomic. I switched around the name, maybe a version of ChatGPT where I could say, give me an oversized white t-shirt with 2cm hem and long line. And it was a really, really good representation. And from that, you can draw out the pattern and all the different components. So I found that really interesting. But again, I'm sat there with my product development head on, or like there's the garment technologist on the shoulder going, well, you can't actually really make that like that. So there's so many challenges to be resolved. But yeah, PI I found super interesting and really enjoyed. Yeah. And which PI did you go to in New York? Was it?
Yeah, I went to the New York one in July, so that was a little bit later on, and I felt like there was, even in that time, there was a little bit like there's been a lot of focus on AI throughout the year, and especially I think from this kind of time in from the beginning of the year. But there was a lot less focus. I think it was a little bit more specific towards brands that are based in the US, and then brands kind of coming in and visiting a lot of the technology companies. A lot of companies were very, very excited about. I was there working with Bandicoot and kind of representing them, and I think it was very interesting to see how open people were, and also to see how open a lot of the other people. Because my first time at PI Apparel, so I wasn't sure how the other exhibitors were also going to, whether it was going to be almost like a friendly space for everyone to get together and talk to each other as almost like technology company to technology company. And I felt like that was one of the biggest surprises for me, was that
very positive. Yeah,
everyone was very open, and we had a really, really good time, and people would kind of even after the event go out together and have dinner and drinks and but I felt like almost like with the AI, even there was less talk about AI when I went there, but when you went to the PI Apparel in March in Milan, now that we're at the end of the year, do you feel like there was anything that you picked up on in March that you now almost like look back at that has actually happened or has not happened since March?
The same point of conversation, I think, which was reiterated again and again and again, was interoperability. I think so. It's not that I'm not saying it was resolved in the PI in the talks I went to in March, but it was just brought up again and again and again around interoperability and this slight sticking point between PLM and everyone else. So you've got all of the PLM systems, but it's essentially a case of we keep on coming across the same kind of conversations around, we have this big system which runs all of our back end and we feed everything into, but it provides absolutely no visual cues to the designers and the buyers and all of this. So it's the interoperability within those spaces, I think, is really key. And obviously, the resolution of that is everyone has an article number that can be read that's the same, and you have an API and you can make it work. But it's a huge piece of work for any company to undertake. So I think just interoperability was my takeaway, and still is really, if I'm honest.
Yeah. No, I think that still is that's going to be an important topic even in the next year and probably onwards from there.
Yeah. Something I was going to say in June, which I also did, was the Future Fabrics Expo. So that's run by Sustainable Angle. It's in London. It's for 2 days. They've actually just had an event in New York in mid-November as well, which some people might have gone to who are listening. And so I've been talking to Amanda Johnson, who set up Sustainable Angle, for a number of years, and she is such a pioneer of collaboration, innovation, and she's had really interesting technology solutions shown at Future Fabrics Expo. So I had a space this year, and I don't think I got a breath. I definitely didn't get time to go and get a coffee or fill up my water. I was just talking completely all day long about how digitization can be a route towards supporting sustainability, because it's the pure focus is on sustainable materials and sustainable practices, And obviously how technology can then enhance those sustainable practices is the space that we're working in. And it was quite new, like the conversation around digital materials and 3D product development was quite new for a lot of people that I was talking to, which I found interesting, considering so many people in that sustainable field are pioneers in their own right, and have done so much research, and have really pushed forward in companies they're working in to get these materials actually into core products. So it was a bit of an eye-opener for me that digitization was a new-ish topic. And there was a huge amount of interest. I cannot say I walked away from there with sort of like 10 new clients. It wasn't that case. It was much more education, knowledge sharing, explaining. So that was really, really positive, I thought. And from that, we then digitized Papillon Bleu's materials, which they are a mill. Well, they're a textile supplier, and they work with mills in India, and it's all around regenerative cotton. So we did a whole piece of work digitizing their materials, which they've now given out to their customers for free, so they can do their product development in 3D, all specifically in Clo. And that was a really good driver to kind of go down that full digitized supply chain using a top of the line regen cotton specialist. So that was really good.
Yeah. And I think, remember, it was quite of an exciting kind of time in June, July, and I think we both I came out of PR Apparel in July, and you came out of the Future Fabric Expo. I remember both of us almost like not having had time to drink water or eat lunch or anything in that time. So, but I feel like almost like if I'm now looking back at what happened in the summer, I think everyone was quite like, there was a lot of like, at least it felt like those months coming up to the summer, there was then a lot of excitement and a lot of things happening. A lot of brands were very excited, and then it felt like also like that. And this is not, I think, a lot of the brands' fault, but it feels like maybe the second half of the year there's been a little bit more just, I don't even know if it's correct to say chaos in the world, or like a bit of a dip, but also just generally in the world, there's been so many things happening that has been created a very complex environment for, I think, everyone, tech companies and brands. And so even though, like there was such a great event and so many things happening, it still also feels like there's just been a very tough, it's been a kind of a tough 5-6 months now at the end of the year, where there's also like, big talks around like elections happening, and a lot of people maybe also waiting around to know what's going to happen. And maybe these things, like if we look very positively towards next year, now that a lot of these unknowns are a little bit more behind us, and there's still unknowns in the next year in the future, but they're, like maybe people are now leaving behind 2024 and going into 2025 with a bit of kind of optimism and positivity, and then picking up again maybe a little bit where we got interrupted at around that kind of halfway or after summer. It felt like almost like people went on summer holiday, and then we never really came back kind of fully after the summer.
And that reflects in the episodes we did, because we talked about like, is CPC dead? Can we resurrect CPC?
We did,
And we both felt that.
Yeah.
The market went really, really quiet in certain areas. It was almost as if, everyone held back until, November, to see what was going to happen. And there were so many other sort of like geopolitical challenges and many different things happening in the world. I also think as well that all of the talks around security and data sharing and data privacy and who owns our data has an inherent knock-on effect when we're also talking about digitization, because we have to then consider that we're putting our IP, or we're putting our design rights into a digital file, which we're very used to doing as designers and product developers. But suddenly they're putting it into a cloud, sharing it in this way, having this real open sense of collaboration with garment manufacturers and mills, which is what we should be doing. But actually, when everyone's going, but what about security, and what about this, and sharing our data, hacks, all of that, it reflects on what we're doing still. So we have to keep on saying, we must consider digital security. We also need to consider the amount of data we're creating and how sustainable that is within the space that we're working on. I constantly get asked the question, how can you work in AI when it's so bad for the environment? And I first of all have to say, okay, I don't use AI in my business, but it is a very, very energy hungry piece of solution, right? At the end of the day, we can't deny that, not to kind of go back to AI. But I think all of these wider conversations that we're all having in our personal lives and business lives reflect on what we're doing.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that was almost like a little bit of a bit of a summary of the second half of the year after the summer, and kind of how that has felt a little bit like, and what we're bringing into the next year. But even though, that was not to say that the second half of the year has not been full of exciting things as well, because there has been quite a few things. And you've also had, last year we both attended the 3D Tech Fest together, which I would probably even say was actually kind of the birth of this podcast.
It was. Yeah.
We had a really good session, and a really good kind of set of preparation sessions leading up to that 3D Tech Fest event or presentation that we did last year, and we did that one together. And then we both presented during the 3D Tech Fest this year, but then we did two separate sessions.
So one after the other
as well. Yeah. But that was a bit of a highlight, I think, also around September time for both of us.
Yeah, that was, and leading on from that, just also some workshops using Polycam and augmented reality. So taking actually taking some of the software applications out into the wild with the general public, people who aren't in this space, and how they respond to seeing digital versions of fashion garments that are generally they see behind glass cases in museums. So getting that kind of feedback as well has been really interesting, and it's really, on my side, it's really ignited or reignited my passion for working as well with the general public and groups of people, and doing workshops and making sure that you're getting that kind of instant feedback as well. I think I done 4 workshops this year, and it always it's so rich, so much feedback, whether it's positive or negative, it doesn't really matter. It's more a case of what are the feelings? How are you feeling from using this technology? Do you feel like you've learned something? Is it feeling accessible? Does it feel cold? Where are you going with it? So the September was a great space. So that was my last workshop was towards the end of September, actually. So
Yeah. And then you got selected for off the back of the project you've done earlier in the year, and before that you also got the big South by Southwest, which I think is really cool. Selection, a little sneak peek into what's happening next year.
It is exciting. So I'm talking in March. I'm terrified, but it's fine, in Austin. I'm talking in March, and it's called, the title is I Digitized That J-Lo Dress, and this is what I learned. If you're not sure which that J-Lo dress is, then just go back to 2000 and look at the green jungle dress. And that's really going to be all of that. The talk is actually all about the learnings, the different scanning types, public accessibility, and all of the different teams I've worked with to get to this point, focused around the Dress of the Year collection from the Fashion Museum Bath. So that's really exciting. And then also South by Southwest is coming to London, which I'm not currently going to, but so many people I know are doing panel picker for. So I've been voting for anyone who's basically got a panel. I'm like, yes, I want to hear that. So we'll have it in London in June, which is for the first time, which is kind of exciting as well.
That is exciting. Yeah, we talked about that we had to meet up in person. So maybe that's if it doesn't happen around maybe that time, then maybe something else. But that's a real reveal for next year, maybe. But
and then what your side with anything going on in Hong Kong? Or
Yes, I was in Hong Kong twice after the summer, which was very, very exciting. I have, aside from working with the Digital Fabric and Bandicoot kind of with the technology there, I've also, since 2015, I had my own company in Hong Kong, which is now kind of, I'm not as involved in on a day-to-day basis, but I still am to a certain extent. But there's been a lot of exciting things happening with essentially that work is much more about working together with fabric mills, garment factories, specifically with manufacturers, on more specifically kind of how they trade with each other and collaborate in sales and marketing between fabric mills and garment factories, bringing in new technologies into discussion around 3D and DPC. And so it kind of everything is very, very interconnected. And I would say that there's a lot of companies that are, I think, slowly also, I've written a little bit about, and that I think also eventually led me to, both with the podcast that we've had here, these conversations and things that I've gotten myself more involved in, speaking at some universities and having kind of been invited to come and share, I think, more of this with universities, also particular in Hong Kong. Also led me into making a little bit of an update to my website, which I believe also you did with your own website, right, Gabby?
Yeah. It was
we both kind of updated our websites with this. I've started a little bit of almost like a blog where I try to write, and for me, I'm doing it primarily for myself and to just summarize and to kind of define a little bit more of my thinking. And I feel like that's been very, very valuable, very much for myself, but also for kind of bringing me more into, and I think you've inspired me quite a lot with this, with education, and with like how you've been involved with education. I've always been very, very keen to support education, and in this year in particular I've gotten that chance, and in the next year I've even now gotten a chance to do even more of it. So I'm going to be working with Copenhagen Business School here in Copenhagen, where I'm based. I'm also going to be working with Hong Kong Design Institute in Hong Kong, and being very kind of a little bit more involved in the education and getting to, I don't know, like also that, like seeing people and getting more involved, like students are such a refreshing energy. I'm really looking forward to these things. So that's kind of like also like been brewing a little bit over step by step, or kind of blog post by blog post, and just to kind of engaging and trying to get out there and do something a little bit differently. That's really highlight of the year.
Well, yeah, and to end on the 2 final points in education on my side. So I work with Penny Norman at Arts University of Bournemouth. So the scanning centre is nearly ready to open there, which is actually, it's already really being used by the students, but we're working at how we open that publicly. So it will be a scanning hub based out of there. They've really gone to town with the technology that they've got there, Clo and Browseware, VisuScanner. And then actually like digital looms, they've got loads of different things there, all within the innovation hub. So that is kicking off. Yeah, that's probably going to be Feb, March when it's open, but it's all being used by the students currently, which is fantastic. And then the second thing on my side is I have just been awarded from University of Arts London, London College of Fashion, Entrepreneur in Residence for digital product development. So congratulations. That is very exciting. So basically that means that I'll be able to work with lots of different courses, talk about digital fashion, digital product development within that space, do talks, do workshops. And so they've kind of got a roster of entrepreneurs, mid-stage career people who they can call on to work with their students as well. So that happens, I think, on Monday, actually. So I haven't this is my official announcement. So yay.
Fresh news. Okay, anyone who's listening to this is the first time these news are launched.
Very exciting. So that's probably us coming to a close for 2024. It's been a really interesting year, I would say. Really
yes, it definitely has been, and I feel like we've had a good kind of pace throughout the year. But I think even we did the first season before the summer, and this kind of what we've been doing here. We started then by doing a little bit longer episodes. We shortened that down to doing more frequent but shorter episodes, which we mentioned in many of the other episodes, that we did these kind of shorter 20 minutes ish sessions. It's been really nice to kind of just catch up and get to talk a little bit more broadly about these different topics and what's happening. I think also if people were missing out on something in DPC and digital materials from what we've talked about, the Interline has also launched the DPC report for 2024. So if you head over to Interline's website, you can download the report. There are then interviews with kind of many of the other people beside us that also have a big and important voice in DPC. So I can't remember how many pages, but there's lots of pages there with some good summaries of 2024, which is kind of like what we're doing in this. So if you want to get some reading for the weekend and for the holiday ahead, I can recommend the DPC report.
And also, just talking about summaries, our podcast has been listened to in 32 different countries.
True.
We have done 17 episodes, which is very exciting. Over 500 minutes. It seems like a long time. And over 500 downloads as well. So that's 2024 for us. It's very exciting.
That's 2024. Actually, this will be our 18th episode. So that's quite exciting also to know. So we'll be back in the next year. We have some good plans for next year, but we like to switch things up like we did over the summer, and we're going to come back with something exciting in the next year. So stay tuned for that.
Brilliant. See you on the other side, people.
See you on the other side. See you next year in 2025. All right.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to The Seamless Blend. If you enjoyed today's discussion, feel free to subscribe. We also invite you to connect with us and participate in our discussions on Discord. Let us know if you agree, disagree, or have any questions. Until next time, take care.